Things are looking lovely now, but we still need to solve those second and third problems, and make sure our prompt disappears when we walk away from a character or when a text box comes up. To tackle this, we're going to create another custom function like we did before, and we're going to store it in that script asset that we already made, the scr underscore prompt control. This way we can get rid of a prompt anytime we want, right from a simple script. So in your asset browser, find the prompt control script asset that we made before, double click it to open that, and you'll notice that we have our original function here, the scr underscore show prompt. So below that, let's go ahead and add a new function. Remember, we can have as many functions as we want inside a script asset, so that's what we're going to do. So we'll type function scr underscore dismiss prompt. We'll give an open curly brace and a closing curly brace. So now you've set up a quick function. And we're going to go ahead and write this now. I'm just going to paste in the code and then explain what we're doing right away. First, however, we need to add some arguments to this function that we're going to use. So I'm going to add in underscore which prompt, and then a comma, and then underscore to reset. I'll explain this in a moment. And I'm going to paste in the rest of the code. So let's look at what's going on here. Which prompt is the specific object prompt that we want to deal with? Now, if you recall, before I talked about how we can return the value of a function, as we did here, to capture exactly which prompt we're creating. So if we're walking over to the baker and a prompt appears above his head, that's a separate instance than if we walk over to the teacher and a prompt appears above her head. So we want to capture the exact instance ID of that specific prompt, which we had done before in our show prompt function right here. Now, we are able to take that return value and then put it back into this function and search for it to say, okay, I want to find this specific prompt instance. And I'm checking here to make sure that, the prompt hasn't gone away or there isn't some problem with it. So we're first checking to see if it's undefined, which is just sort of a constant in GameMaker Studio 2. It's just a safety thing. And then we're making sure that the instance still exists, in case it's already disappeared or been destroyed. And then we are doing something to it here. So this is something new. This is called a with statement. And with statements are a powerful feature of GameMaker Studio 2. They let one instance temporarily duck into another and execute code. So in this case, this function is going to execute code within the specific instance of the prompt object and then just get out again. So with whatever the instance that we've defined here under which prompt is, go into that prompt and then change its fadeMe variable. So if you recall, we have that variable here in object prompt. In this function, we're actually able to duck into that exact instance, change its variable on its behalf, and then get out, which is really cool. And then next here, we're actually looking for the player object and using yet another with statement to duck into that object and run some code. So I've created a switch function here using this argument that will feed to this function called toReset. And it's only got one case right now. We're going to expand on this later, but this is what we need for now. And if you recall, in our player object, we have this variable called NPC prompt, which by default is set to no one, right? We haven't created a prompt above a character's head yet. Then we run the function show prompt, which pops up the prompt, and we take the exact instance ID of that prompt that we're making, return it, and whatever that instance ID was becomes the value of NPC prompt in the player object. So the player knows what that prompt is. Now in this new function, we're actually telling the player, okay, just reset whatever that variable is, the NPC prompt, right back to no one to say, we don't have a prompt open, we're fine. So we're basically closing the loop on this. This will make a lot more sense once we get this into action. So let's just do that now. From your asset browser, open up your player object and go to its step event. Now in the step event, we have a code block that says check for collision with NPCs. We have an if statement that says if nearby NPC, which is where we pop up the prompt that we made in the first place. And then we have the second one that says if not nearby NPC, which is when we're not standing in front of a NPC such as the baker and teacher. We're just going to add a simple line here. So after where it says reset greeting, let's add a brand new code block. Give this a title. Get rid of prompt. And we're going to go ahead and call that function that we just made. So I'll type str underscore dismiss, and you can see it auto pops up here. I'm going to just hit enter to accept this. And we need to feed this function 2 arguments. So in this case, which prompt are we trying to close? Well, we figured that out before by using this variable NPC prompt. That's where we captured the exact instance ID of the prompt that pops up above a character's head. So all we need to do is type in NPC prompt, hit a comma, and for the second argument, we're just going to type a 0. Now that second argument is dealt with here, the one called toReset. And this is because a little bit later we're going to have some extra cases talking about which kinds of prompts we might want to get rid of. Right now there's only one option, and all we're doing is with that 0 is going back into the player object and resetting this variable to no one. So let's go ahead and run our game and we'll see this in action. Now when we walk up to an NPC, the prompt correctly appears and disappears when we walk away. So let's close the game window and return to GameMaker Studio 2. And let's do one last thing. Open up your text box object and go to its create event. Now, if you recall, we said we also wanted to make sure that there were no prompts on the screen when a text box object popped up, because otherwise they would overlap and that would look kind of weird. So in the create event of the text box object, let's make a new line. And let's essentially add the exact same code that we just did or added into the player object. So I'll just say dismiss any visible prompts. And I'm going to type str underscore dismiss. I'm going to hit enter to accept that autocorrect. And we'll enter in our arguments. Now we're going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to type in obj underscore prompt. And we'll type in 0 as the second argument. Like that. So what's the difference here? Here in the text box, what we're saying is dismiss prompt, and we're asking which prompt. By just putting in obj underscore prompt, it's going to get rid of any prompts that exist, regardless of which ones are open. In the player, we are targeting specifically the prompt that we just made by standing next to another character and having that prompt pop up above their heads. It's a subtle difference, but it is important. Let's run the game again and see what's going on. I'm going to walk over to the teacher again. The prompt is correctly appearing and disappearing like it did before. Now when the prompt is there, I'll press the space bar to create a text box. And the prompt disappears because the text box has told it to go away. If I press space again to get rid of the text box, the prompt will correctly reappear because we're still standing in front of the teacher. And it will go away if we move away. So that's it for the prompt object. When you're ready to move on, you can go ahead and close the game window and return to GameMaker Studio 2.